Mongolia is a landlocked country in East Asia bordered by Russia to the north and China to the south. It covers an area of 1,564,116 square kilometers with a population of 3.5 million, making it the world's most sparsely populated sovereign state. Mongolia is the world's largest landlocked country that does not border a closed sea. Much of its area is covered by grassy steppe with mountains to the north and west and Gobi Desert to the south. Ulaanbaat, capital and largest city, is home to roughly half of the country's population. The territory of modern-day Mongolia has been ruled by various nomadic empires including Xiongnu, Xianbei, Rouran, First Turkic Khaganate, Second Turkic Khaganate, Uyghur Khaganate and others. In 1206, Genghis Khan founded the Mongol Empire, which became history's largest contiguous land empire. His grandson Kublai Khan conquered China proper and established Yuan dynasty. After the collapse of Yuan, the Mongols retreated to Mongolia and resumed their earlier pattern of factional conflict except during the era of Dayan Khan and Tumen Zasagd Khan. In the 16th century, Tibetan Buddhism spread to Mongolia, further led by the Manchu-founded Qing dynasty, which absorbed the country in the 17th century. By early 20th century, almost one-third of the adult male population were Buddhist monks. After the collapse of Qing dynasty in 1911, Mongolia declared independence and achieved actual independence from Republic of China in 1921. Shortly thereafter, the country became a satellite state of Soviet Union. In 1924, Mongolian People's Republic was founded as a socialist state. After the anti-communist revolutions of 1989, Mongolia conducted its own peaceful democratic revolution in early 1990. This led to a multi-party system, a new constitution of 1992 and transition to a market economy. Approximately 30% of the population is nomadic or semi-nomadic. Horse culture remains integral. Buddhism is the majority religion, 51.7%, with non-religious being the second largest group, 40.6%. Islam is the third largest religious identification, 3.2%, among ethnic Kazakhs. The vast majority of citizens are ethnic Mongols, with roughly 5% of the population being Kazakhs, Tuvans, and other ethnic minorities, who are mainly concentrated in the western regions. Mongolia is a member of the United Nations, Asia Cooperation Dialogue, G77, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, Non-Aligned Movement, and a NATO global partner. Mongolia joined the World Trade Organization in 1997 and seeks to expand its participation in regional economic and trade groups. At 1,564,116 kilometers square, Mongolia is the world's 18th largest country. It is significantly larger than the next largest country, Peru. It lies between latitudes 41 degrees and 52 degrees north and longitudes 87 degrees and 120 degrees east. As a point of reference, the northernmost part of Mongolia is on roughly the same latitude as Berlin, Germany and Saskatoon, Canada, while the southernmost part is on approximately the same latitude as Rome, Italy and Chicago, USA. The westernmost part of Mongolia is on the same longitude as Kolkata in India, while the easternmost part is on the same longitude as Qinhuangda and Hangzhou in China, as well as the western edge of Taiwan. Although Mongolia does not share a border with Kazakhstan, its westernmost point is only 36.76 kilometers from Kazakhstan, nearly making a quadrupoint. The geography of Mongolia is varied, with Gobi Desert to the south and cold, mountainous regions to the north and west. Much of Mongolia consists of the Mongolian Manchurian grassland, with forested areas accounting for 11.2% of the total land area, a higher percentage than Ireland, 10%. The whole of Mongolia is considered to be part of the Mongolian Plateau. The highest point in Mongolia is Khustain Peak in the Tavan Bogd Massif in the far west at 4,374 meters. The basin of Uvs Lake, shared with Tuva Republic in Russia, is a natural World Heritage Site. Mongolia is known as Land of Eternal Blue Sky, Munk Kok Tengirian Oran, because it has over 250 sunny days a year. Most of the country is hot in the summer and extremely cold in the winter, with January averages dropping as low as -30 degrees Celsius. A vast front of cold, heavy, shallow air comes in from Siberia in winter and collects in river valleys and low basins, causing very cold temperatures, while slopes of mountains are much warmer due to the effects of temperature inversion, temperature increases with altitude. In winter, Mongolia comes under the influence of the Siberian anticyclone. Most severely affected by this cold weather are Uvs Province, Ulaanbaat, Western Kovsgol, Rinchilhum, Eastern Zavkhan, Tosant Senjal, Northern Bulgan, Hutag, and Eastern Dornad Province, Kalkian Gol. Ulaanbaat is strongly but less severely affected. The cold gets less severe as one goes south, reaching the warmest January temperatures in Gobi Province, Dalanzad Gad, Kanbogd, and the region of the Altai Mountains bordering China. A unique microclimate is the fertile grassland forest region of central and eastern Arkhangai Province, Tsetsaleg, and northern Overkhangai Province, Arvakir, where January temperatures are on average the same and often higher than the warmest desert regions to the south in addition to being more stable. Khangai Mountains play a certain role in forming this microclimate. In Tsetsaleg, the warmest town in this microclimate, nighttime January temperatures rarely go under -30 degrees Celsius, while daytime January temperatures often reach 0 degrees Celsius to 5 degrees Celsius. The country is subject to occasional harsh climatic conditions known as Zud. It results in large proportions of the country's livestock dying from starvation or freezing temperatures or both, resulting in economic upheaval for the largely pastoral population. The annual average temperature in Ulaanbaat is -1.3 degrees Celsius, making it the world's coldest capital city. Mongolia is high, cold and windy. It has extreme continental climate with long, cold winters and short summers during which most of its annual precipitation falls. The country averages 257 cloudless days a year and is usually at the center of a region of high atmospheric pressure. Precipitation is highest in the north, average of 200 to 350 millimeters per year, and lowest in the south, which receives 100 to 200 millimeters annually. The highest annual precipitation of 622.297 millimeters occurred in the forests of Bulgan Province near the border with Russia, and the lowest of 41.735 millimeters occurred in Gobi Desert. The sparsely populated far north of Bulgan Province averages 600 millimeters in annual precipitation, which means it receives more precipitation than Beijing or Berlin. The name Gobi is a Mongol term for a desert steppe, which usually refers to a category of arid rangeland with insufficient vegetation to support marmots but with enough to support camels. 59. Mongols distinguish Gobi from desert proper, although the distinction is not always apparent to outsiders unfamiliar with the Mongolian landscape. 59. The name Gobi is a Mongol term for a desert steppe, which usually refers to a category of arid rangeland with insufficient vegetation to support marmots but with enough to support camels. Mongols distinguish Gobi from desert proper, although the distinction is not always apparent to outsiders unfamiliar with the Mongolian landscape. Gobi rangelands are fragile and easily destroyed by overgrazing, which results in expansion of the true desert, a stony waste where not even Bactrian camels can survive. The arid conditions in the Gobi are attributed to the rain-shadow effect caused by the Himalayas. Before the Himalayas were formed by the collision of the Indo-Australian plate with the Eurasian plate 10 million years ago, Mongolia was a flourishing habitat for major fauna but still somewhat arid and cold due to distance from sources of evaporation. Sea turtle and mollusk fossils have been found in the Gobi, apart from well-known dinosaur fossils. Tadpole shrimps are still found in the Gobi today. The eastern part of Mongolia, including the Onon and Kurlan rivers and Lake Buir, form part of the Amur River basin draining to the Pacific Ocean. It hosts some unique species like the eastern brook lamprey, Dorian crayfish, Camberoides doricus, and Dorian pearl oyster, Dahiranea dahurica, in the Onon Kurlan rivers, as well as Siberian prawn, Exopalaemon modestus, in Lake Buir. Mongols are moderately homogeneous. Ethnic Mongols account for 95% of the population and consist of Khalkha and other groups, all distinguished by dialects of Mongol language. The Khalkha make up 86% of the ethnic Mongol population. The remaining 14% include Oirats, Beriots, and others. Turkic peoples, Kazakhs and Tuvans, constitute 4.5% of Mongolia's population. The rest are Russian, Chinese, Korean, and American nationalities. Mongolia's official and national language is Mongolian. A member of the Mongolic language family, the standard dialect is Khalkha Mongol. Since 1990, English supplanted Russian as the most popular foreign language in Mongolia. In the communist era, Russian was a vital language for mobility and professional communication, with large number of students studying in Soviet Union as well as large number of Soviet professionals and soldiers located within Mongolia. Since then, Mongolia's education system has reoriented away from Soviet Union to the West, and English become the dominant foreign language, aided by liberalized media, international aid agencies, rise of private education and tutoring. From 2014 to 2015 academic year, 59% of the overall student population studied English at public secondary schools. In 2023, English was declared the first foreign language and taught from the 3rd grade. According to 2010 national census, among Mongolians aged 15 and above, 53% were Buddhists, while 39% were non-religious. Mongolian shamanism widely practiced throughout the history of what is now Mongolia, with similar beliefs common among the nomads of Central Asia. They gradually gave way to Tibetan Buddhism, but shamanism has left a mark on Mongolian religious culture and continues to practiced. The Kazakhs of Western Mongolia, some Mongols, and other Turkic peoples in the country traditionally adhere to Islam. Throughout much of 20th century, the communist government repressed religious practices. It targeted the clergy of Mongolian Buddhist Church, which had been tightly intertwined with the previous feudal government structures. From 1911, the head of the church had also been the Khan of the country. In late 1930s, the regime led by Kolugian Choibalsan closed almost all of Mongolia's 700 Buddhist monasteries and killed at least 30,000 people, of whom 18,000 were lamas. The number of Buddhist monks dropped from 100,000 in 1924 to 110 in 1990. The fall of communism in 1991 restored public religious practice. Tibetan Buddhism, which had been the predominant religion prior to the rise of communism, again rose to become the most widely practiced religion in Mongolia. The highest-ranking Lama of Buddhism in Mongolia has been vacant since the 9th Gebsundamba's passing in 2012, and the search for the next Gebsundamba Khutuktu is being complicated by Beijing's desire to assert control over Tibetan Buddhism. The end of religious repression in the 1990s also allowed for other religions to spread in the country. According to Christian missionary group Barnabas Fund, the number of Christians grew from just 4 in 1989 to around 40,000 as of 2008. In May 2013, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints held cultural program to celebrate 20 years of church history in Mongolia, with 10,900 members and 16 church buildings in the country. There are 1,000 Catholics in Mongolia. In 2003, missionary from the Philippines was named Mongolia's first Catholic bishop. In 2017, Seventh-day Adventists reported 2,700 members in 6 churches, up from 0 members in 1991. As of 2020, 47.6% of the population lives in Ulaanbaat. 21.4% lived in Darkhan, Erdenet, the Amag centers and some centers and other permanent settlements. 31% in rural areas. Economic activity in Mongolia has long based on herding and agriculture, although development of extensive mineral deposits of copper, coal, molybdenum, tin, tungsten and gold have emerged as a driver of industrial production. Besides mining, 21.8% of GDP, and agriculture, 16% of GDP, dominant industries in the composition of GDP are wholesale and retail trade and service, transportation and storage, and real estate activities. Also, Mongolia produces 1/5 of the world's raw cashmere. Agriculture in Mongolia constitutes over 10% of Mongolia's annual gross domestic product and employs 1/3 of the labor force. However, the high altitude, extreme fluctuation in temperature, long winters, and low precipitation provides limited potential for agricultural development. The growing season is only 95 to 110 days. Because of Mongolia's harsh climate, it is unsuited to most cultivation. The agriculture sector therefore remains heavily focused on nomadic animal husbandry, with 75% of the land allocated to pasture and cropping only employing 3% of the population. About 35% of all households in Mongolia lived from breeding livestock. Most herders in Mongolia follow a pattern of nomadic or semi-nomadic pastoralism. Crops produced in Mongolia include wheat, barley, and potatoes. Animals raised commercially in Mongolia include sheep, goats, cattle, horses, camels, and pigs. They are raised for meat, although goats are valued for their hair which can be used to produce cashmere. Livestock breeds are increasingly challenged by land degradation and climate change. Populations suffer from more frequent and intense extreme weather events, especially brutal winter seasons called zoods that destroy forage and decrease temperatures to around -50 degrees Celsius. While zoods used to occur about once every 10 years, there have now been 6 in the past decade, with over 6 million animals, 9% of total livestock, killed by these conditions in the winter of 2024. The Trans-Mongolian Railway is the main rail link between Mongolia and its neighbors. It begins at Trans-Siberian Railway in Russia at Ulaanbaat town, crosses into Mongolia, runs through Ulaanbaat, then passes into China at Orkhon, where it joins the Chinese railway system. A separate railroad link connects the eastern city of Choibalsan with Trans-Siberian Railway. However, that link is closed to passengers after the Mongolian town of Ulaanbaat. Mongolia also has a 233 km cargo rail link from Tavan Tolgoi coal mine to Chinese border. Mongolia has a number of domestic airports, with some having international status. However, the main international airport is Chinggis Khan International Airport, located 52 kilometers south of Ulaanbaat. Direct flight connections exist between Mongolia and South Korea, China, Thailand, Hong Kong, Japan, Russia, Germany, and Turkey. MIAT Mongolian Airlines is Mongolia's national air carrier, operating international flights, while air carriers such as Aero Mongolia and Hunu Airlines serve domestic and short international routes. Many overland roads in Mongolia are only gravel roads or simple cross-country tracks. There are paved roads from Ulaanbaat to the Russian and Chinese borders, from Ulaanbaat east and westward, the so-called Millennium Road, and from Darkhan to Bulgan. A number of road construction projects are currently underway. The traditional Mongolian dwelling is known as a ger. In the past it was known by Russian term yurt, but has changed as Mongolian term becomes better known in English-speaking countries. According to Mongolian artist and art critic N. Chultum, the ger was the basis for development of traditional Mongolian architecture. In the 16th and 17th centuries, lamaseries were built throughout the country. Many of them started as ger temples. When they needed to be enlarged to accommodate the growing number of worshippers, the Mongolian architects used structures with 6 and 12 angles with pyramidal roofs to approximate to the round shape of a ger. Further enlargement led to a quadratic shape of the temples. The roofs were made in the shape of marquees. The trellis walls, roof poles, and layers of felt were replaced by stone, brick, beams and planks, and became permanent. Chultum distinguished 3 styles in traditional Mongolian architecture: Mongolian, Tibetan, and Chinese, as well as combinations of the 3. Among the first quadratic temples was Batutsagan, 1654, designed by Zanabazar. An example of the ger style architecture is the Lamasery Dashi Choiling in Ulaanbaat. The temple Lavrin, 18th century, in the Erdene Zu Lamasery was built in the Tibetan tradition. An example of a temple built in the Chinese tradition is the Lamasery Choijing Lamian Sum, 1904, which is a museum today. The quadratic temple Dzogchen in Lamasery Gandan in Ulaanbaat is a combination of the Mongolian and Chinese tradition. The Temple of Metria, disassembled in 1938, is an example of the Tibeto-Mongolian architecture. Dashi Choiling Monastery has commenced a project to restore the temple and the 25-meter sculpture of Metria. Mongolian cuisine predominantly consists of dairy products, meat, and animal fats. The most common rural dish is cooked mutton. In the city, steamed dumplings filled with meat, booze, are popular. The extreme continental climate of Mongolia and the lowest population density in the world of just 2.2 inhabitants per kilometer square has influenced the traditional diet. Use of vegetables and spices are limited. Mongolia is one of few Asian countries where rice is not a main staple food. Instead, Mongolian people prefer to eat lamb as their staple food rather than rice. Wheat, barley, buckwheat predominate more than rice in modern Mongolia. The main national festival is Nadam, which has been organized for centuries and takes place over 3 days in the summer, consisting of 3 Mongolian traditional sports: archery, cross-country horse racing, and wrestling, traditionally recognized as the 3 manly games of Nadam. In modern-day Mongolia, Naadam is held from July 11th to 13th in the honor of the anniversaries of National Democratic Revolution and foundation of Great Mongol State. Another very popular activity called shagar is the flicking of sheep ankle bones at a target several feet away, using a flicking motion of the finger to send the small bone flying at targets and trying to knock the target bones off the platform. At Naadam, this contest is popular among older Mongolians. Horse riding is especially central to Mongolian culture. The long-distance races that showcased during Naadam festivals are one aspect of this, as is the popularity of trick riding. One example of trick riding is the legend that the Mongolian military hero Damdin Sukbeta scattered coins on the ground and then picked them up while riding a horse at full gallop. Mongolian wrestling is the most popular of all Mongol sports. It is the highlight of the three manly games of Naadam. Historians claim that Mongol-style wrestling originated 7,000 years ago. Hundreds of wrestlers from different cities and amags around the country take part in the national wrestling competition. Khoit-Tsenka Cave in Khuvd province shows lively pink, brown, and red ochre paintings dated to 20,000 years ago of mammoths, lynx, Bactrian camels and ostriches, earning it the nickname the Lascars of Mongolia. The Venus figurines of Maltar 21,000 years ago testify to the level of Upper Paleolithic art in northern Mongolia. Maltar is now part of Russia. Neolithic agricultural settlements, c. 5500 to 3500 BC, such as those at Noravlin, Tamsagbilag, Bayanzag and Rushon Kad, predated the introduction of horse riding nomadism, a pivotal event in the history of Mongolia which became the dominant culture. Horse riding nomadism has been documented by archaeological evidence in Mongolia during Copper and Bronze Age. Afanasevo culture 3500 to 2500 BC, this Indo-European culture was active to the Khangai Mountains in central Mongolia. The wheeled vehicles found in the burials of the Afanasevans dated to before 2200 BC. Pastoral nomadism and metalworking became more developed with the later Okunv culture 2nd millennium BC. Andronovo culture 2300 to 1000 BC and Karasuk culture 1500 to 300 BC, culminating with the Iron Age Xiongnu Empire in 209 BC. Monuments of pre-Xiongnu Bronze Age include deer stones, Keregsu kurgans, square slab tombs and rock paintings. Although cultivation of crops has continued since Neolithic, agriculture has always remained small in scale compared to pastoral nomadism. Agriculture may have first been introduced from the west or arose independently in the region. The population during the Copper Age has been described as Mongoloid in the east of what is now Mongolia and as Europoid in the west. Tocharians, Yuezhi, and Scythians inhabited western Mongolia during Bronze Age. The mummy of a Scythian warrior, which is believed to be about 2,500 years old, was a 30 to 40-year-old man with blonde hair. It was found in Altai, Mongolia. As equine nomadism was introduced into Mongolia, the political center of the Eurasian steppe also shifted to Mongolia, where it remained until the 18th century. The intrusions of northern pastoralists, Gui Fang, Shanrong and Donghu, into China during Shang dynasty and Zhou dynasty presaged the age of nomadic empires. Since the prehistoric times, Mongolia has been inhabited by nomads who, from time to time, formed great confederations that rose to power and prominence. The first of these empires, the Xiongnu of undetermined ethnicity, were brought together by Modu Shanyu to form a confederation in 209 BC. Soon they emerged as the greatest threat to the Qin dynasty, forcing the latter to construct the Great Wall of China. It was guarded by up to 300,000 soldiers during Marshal Meng Tian's tenure, as a means of defense against the destructive Xiongnu raids. The vast Xiongnu Empire 209 BC to 93 AD was followed by the Mongolic Xianbei Empire 93 to 234 AD, which also ruled more than the entirety of present-day Mongolia. The Mongolic Rouran Khaganate of Xianbei provenance was the first to use Khagan as an imperial title. It ruled a massive empire before defeated by the Gokturks, an even larger empire. In the chaos of late 12th century, a chieftain named Temujin finally succeeded in uniting the Mongol tribes between Manchuria and the Altai Mountains. In 1206, he took the title Genghis Khan and waged a series of military campaigns, renowned for their brutality and ferocity, sweeping through much of Asia and forming the Mongol Empire, the largest contiguous land empire in world history. Under his successors it stretched from present-day Poland in the west to Korea in the east and from parts of Siberia in the north to the Gulf of Oman and Vietnam in the south, covering 33 million square kilometers, 22% of Earth's total land area, and had a population of over 100 million people, about a quarter of Earth's total population at the time. The emergence of Pax Mongolica also significantly eased trade and commerce across Asia during its height. After Genghis Khan's death, the empire subdivided into 4 kingdoms or khanates. These eventually became quasi-independent after Toluid Civil War, 1260 to 1264, which broke out in a battle for power following Monkey Khan's death in 1259. One of the khanates, the Great Khanate, consisting of the Mongol homeland and most of modern-day China, became known as Yuan dynasty under Kublai Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan. He set up his capital in present-day Beijing. After more than a century of power, Yuan dynasty was overthrown by Ming dynasty in 1368 and the Yuan court fled to the north, thus becoming the Northern Yuan dynasty. As the Ming armies pursued the Mongols into their homeland, they successfully sacked and destroyed the Mongol capital Karakoram and other cities. Some of these attacks were repelled by the Mongols under Ayushridar and his general Köktema. After the expulsion of Yuan rulers from China proper, the Mongols continued to rule their homeland, known in historiography as the Northern Yuan dynasty. With the division of the Mongol tribes, it was subsequently known as the 40 and the 4, doing Dorban among them. The next centuries were marked by violent power struggles among various factions, notably the Jenghizids and the non-Jenghizid Oirats, as well as several Ming invasions such as the 5 expeditions led by the Yongle Emperor. In the early 16th century, Dayan Khan and his Khatun Mandakai reunited all Mongol groups under the Jenghizids. In mid-16th century, Altan Khan of the Tumd, a grandson of Dayan Khan but not a hereditary or legitimate Khan, became powerful. He founded Hohhot in 1557. After he met with the Dalai Lama in 1578, he ordered the introduction of Tibetan Buddhism to Mongolia. It was the second time this had occurred. Altai Khan of the Khalkha converted to Buddhism and founded Erdinzu Monastery in 1585. His grandson Zanabazar became the first Jebsundamba Kututu in 1640. Following the leaders, the entire Mongolian population embraced Buddhism. Each family kept scriptures and Buddha statues on an altar at the north side of their yurt. Mongolian nobles donated land, money, and herders to the monasteries. As was typical in states with established religions, the top religious institutions, the monasteries, wielded significant temporal power in addition to spiritual power. Some scholars estimate that 80% of 600,000 or more Dzunga were killed by a combination of disease and warfare. Outer Mongolia was given relative autonomy, being administered by the hereditary Jenghizid Khanates of Tashit Khan, Setsen Khan, Zasagt Khan, and Sain Noyon Khan. The Jebsundamba Kutuktu of Mongolia had immense de facto authority. The Manchu forbade mass Chinese immigration into the area, which allowed the Mongols to keep their culture. The Oirats who migrated to the Volga steppes in Russia became known as Kalmyks. The main trade route during this period was the Tea Road through Siberia. Lit had permanent stations located every 25 to 30 kilometers, each of which was staffed by 5 to 30 chosen families. Until 1911, Qing dynasty maintained control of Mongolia with a series of alliances and intermarriages as well as military and economic measures. Ambans, Manchu high officials, were installed in Kuri, Uliastai, Kuvd, and the country was divided into numerous feudal and ecclesiastical fiefdoms which also placed people in power with loyalty to the Qing. Over the course of 19th century, the feudal lords attached more importance to representation and less importance to the responsibilities towards their subjects. The behavior of Mongolia's nobility, together with usurious practices by Chinese traders and the collection of imperial taxes in silver instead of animals, resulted in widespread poverty among the nomads. By 1911 there were 700 large and small monasteries in Outer Mongolia. 115,000 monks made up 21% of the population. With the fall of Qing dynasty in 1911, Mongolia under Bogd Khan declared its independence. However, the newly established Republic of China considered Mongolia to be part of its own territory. Yuan Shikai, the president of the Republic of China, considered the new republic to be the successor of the Qing. Bogd Khan said that both Mongolia and China had been administered by the Manchu during the Qing, and after the fall of the Qing dynasty in 1911, the contract of Mongolian submission to the Manchu had become invalid. The area controlled by the Bogd Khan was approximately that of the former Outer Mongolia during Qing period. In 1919, after October Revolution in Russia, Chinese troops led by warlord Xu Shuzheng occupied Mongolia. Warfare erupted on the northern border. As a result of the Russian Civil War, the White Russian Lieutenant General Baron Ungern led his troops into Mongolia in October 1920, defeating the Chinese forces in Nyasaland Kuri, now Ulaanbaat, in early February 1921 with Mongol support. To eliminate the threat posed by Ungern, Bolshevik Russia decided to support the establishment of a communist Mongolian government and army. This Mongolian army took the Mongolian part of Kyakhta from Chinese forces on the 18th of March, 1921, and on the 6th of July, Russian and Mongolian troops arrived in Kuri. Mongolia declared its independence again on the 11th of July, 1921. As a result, Mongolia was closely aligned with the Soviet Union over the next 7 decades. In 1924, after the Bogd Khan died of laryngeal cancer, or as some sources claim, at the hands of Russian spies, the country's political system was changed. The Mongolian People's Republic was established. In 1928, Khulugyan Choibalsan rose to power. The early leaders of Mongolian People's Republic, 1921 to 1952, included many with pan-Mongolist ideals. However, changing global politics and increased Soviet pressure led to the decline of pan-Mongol aspirations in the following period. Khulugyan Choibalsan instituted collectivization of livestock, began the destruction of Buddhist monasteries, and carried out Stalinist purges, which resulted in the murders of numerous monks and other leaders. In Mongolia during the 1920s, approximately 1/3 of the male population were monks. By the beginning of 20th century, 750 monasteries were functioning in Mongolia, and by the end of the 1930s almost all had been looted or razed. In 1930, Soviet Union stopped Buryat migration to Mongolian People's Republic to prevent Mongolian reunification. All leaders of Mongolia who did not fulfill Stalin's demands to perform Red Terror against Mongolians were executed, including Puljidian Jenden and Anandin Amar. The Stalinist purges in Mongolia, which began in 1937, killed more than 30,000 people. Under Stalinist influence in Mongolian People's Republic, 17,000 monks were killed. Choibalsan, who led dictatorship and organized Stalinist purges in Mongolia between 1937 and 1939, died suspiciously in the Soviet Union in 1952. After the Japanese invasion of neighboring Manchuria in 1931, Mongolia was threatened on this front. During Soviet-Japanese Border War of 1939, the Soviet Union successfully defended Mongolia against Japanese expansionism. Mongolia fought against Japan during battles of Khalkhin Gol in 1939 and during Soviet-Japanese War in August 1945 to liberate Inner Mongolia from Japan and Mengjiang. February 1945 Yalta Conference provided Soviet Union's participation in the Pacific War. One of Soviet conditions for its participation was that after the war, Outer Mongolia would retain its independence. The referendum took place on the 20th of October, 1945, with 100% of the electorate voting for independence. The dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991 strongly influenced Mongolian politics and youth. Its people undertook the peaceful democratic revolution in January 1990 and the introduction of a multi-party system and a market economy. At the same time, the transformation of the former Marxist-Leninist Mongolian People's Revolutionary Party to the current Social Democratic Mongolian People's Party reshaped the country's political landscape. A new constitution was introduced in 1992 and the term People's Republic was dropped from the country's name. The transition to a market economy was often rocky. During the early 1990s, the country had to deal with high inflation and food shortages. The first election victories for non-communist parties came in 1993 presidential elections and 1996 parliamentary elections.